The morning of my daughter's wedding, I was supposed to be the proudest man alive. Instead, I was standing in a narrow hallway outside the church's side room, holding a cup of coffee that had gone cold, listening to my future son-in-law laugh about how he was going to destroy my little girl's life. I want to tell you something first, before I get into all of it. I am 63 years old. I spent 31 years working as a civil engineer for the city of Atlanta. I coached Little League for 12 seasons. I taught Sunday school for 8. I have never once in my life considered myself a man who schemes or plots or plays games. That is not who I am. My late wife, Catherine, used to say I was too straightforward for my own good. Said I'd walk into a burning building just to tell the fire it was wrong. But what I heard that morning changed something in me. Something quiet and permanent. My daughter's name is Elise. She is 31 years old, and she is the best thing I have ever had anything to do with. After her mother passed pancreatic cancer 3 years ago, it was just the two of us. Elise held my hand at the hospital. She drove me to grief counseling when I was too proud to go alone. She planted marigolds in the backyard because her mother loved them, and every spring she tends them like a promise she made to someone she still talks to. She met Connor at a fundraiser for the Children's Hospital where she works as a pediatric occupational therapist. He was charming. Lord, was he charming? Tall, easy smile, knew exactly what to say and when to say it. He worked in commercial real estate, or so he told us. He drove a nice car, wore good shoes, remembered everyone's name. I didn't dislike him. That's the part that still bothers me. I didn't have that instinct people talk about, that gut feeling. He seemed genuine. He was patient with Elise. He called me sir every single time he addressed me, which, I'll be honest, went a long way. They dated for 2 years. He proposed on Thanksgiving, right there in my dining room, with her mother's ring that Elise had kept in a box in her dresser. I cried. I'm not ashamed to say it. I stood in my kitchen and cried into a dish towel because I thought Catherine would have loved this moment. The wedding was set for a Saturday in April. Bright day, the kind Atlanta gives you sometimes in spring where the dogwoods are still blooming and the air smells like something good is coming. Elise had been planning it for 14 months. Every detail, the flowers, the string quartet, the venue at that old restored estate out in Roswell. She had a journal full of notes. She called me at least twice a week just to talk through things. Was the salmon a better entree than the chicken? Did I think Aunt Lorraine would be offended if she wasn't in the receiving line? That morning I got to the church 2 hours early. I always do that. I'm a man who likes to make sure everything is in order before it needs to be. I walked the space, talked to the coordinator, checked in with the florist about the arrangements near the altar. Then I went looking for a quiet spot to collect myself. There is a hallway that runs behind the main chapel, past the room where the wedding party gets ready, leading to a small courtyard. I've been to that church dozens of times. I know the layout. I was heading to the courtyard to drink my coffee and say a quiet prayer. That's when I heard the voices. The door to the side room was not fully closed. There was maybe a 2-inch gap, and through it came the sound of men laughing. Low, easy laughter. The kind men do when they think no one is listening. I almost kept walking. I had no reason to stop, but I heard Connor's voice clear as anything, and then I heard what he said. She has no idea. Honestly, man, not one clue. The other voice said something I couldn't quite make out. Then Connor again. Her dad set up a trust for her when her mum died. I've seen the statements. We're talking 400,000, minimum. That's not counting the house. Old man owns that place outright. A pause. More laughter. Look, I did what I had to do. 2 years of farmers' markets and church dinners and calling her dad sir every 5 seconds. You think I enjoy talking about grief counseling? I'm an hour away from the finish line. I stood completely still. My coffee was in my hand. I remember looking down at it like it was a foreign object. The cup had a little church logo on the side. I stared at that logo for what felt like a long time. The other man, I recognized the voice now as his friend Bryce, the best man, said something about being careful. Connor laughed again. Careful about what? She's already got the dress on. What's she going to do? And even if he starts asking questions down the line, marriages take time to unwind. By then, I'll know where everything is. I didn't spend 2 years on this to walk away with nothing. I want to tell you what that felt like. I want to be honest. It felt like standing on pavement that suddenly wasn't solid. Like the ground had decided it was done holding me up. Every memory from the last 2 years went through my head in about 4 seconds. Him at my dinner table, at Catherine's grave with us on her birthday, holding Elise's hand at my retirement party. All of it performance. All of it calculation. I pressed myself against the wall. My first instinct, and I mean my very first, was to open that door, to grab Connor by his collar and drag him into that chapel and say, in front of 400 people, every word he had just spoken. But I didn't, and I want to explain to you exactly why I didn't, because I know what some of you are thinking. You're thinking, why didn't you stop it right then? Why did you let your daughter walk down that aisle? Here is the truth. Elise didn't know yet, and I had heard everything, but I had no proof. My word against his. The day of the wedding, in a room full of his family and hers, with everything already set up and paid for. I knew what that scene would look like. I knew what he would do. He would deny it. He would say, I misheard. He would turn on that charm and make me look like an overprotective old man who never wanted to let his daughter go. And Elise, my Elise, who loved this man, who had planned this day for over a year, who had her mother's ring on her finger. She might not have believed me. I needed her to believe me. I stepped back from that door. I walked to the courtyard. I sat on a bench beside a small fountain, and I made a decision. I took out my phone. I opened the voice memo app that my nephew had shown me 2 Christmases ago when he was explaining how he records meetings at work. I had never used it before that morning. I pressed record. I walked back to that hallway. Connor was still talking. I held the phone near the gap in the door for 4 minutes and 23 seconds. I know the exact time because I checked afterward, standing in the parking lot behind the church with my jacket off and my heart hammering like I'd run a mile. I had everything. His voice, clear. Bryce's voice confirming he knew. The specific mention of the trust. The specific mention of my house. The timeline. 2 years of planning. The phrase, finish line. I put the phone in the inside pocket of my jacket. I put my jacket back on. I walked into the chapel, took my place in the front pew, and when Elise appeared at the back of that church in her mother's veil, I stood up with everyone else, and I smiled at her. That was the hardest thing I have ever done in my life. Harder than Catherine's funeral. Harder than anything. She was so beautiful. She was shaking a little, the way she used to do before a piano recital when she was 9 years old, and she saw me and her face settled the way it does when she finds something steady. I gave her my arm. We walked together. At the altar, when the minister asked, "Who gives this woman?" I said I do, because I do. I always will. I sat back down, and I did not hear a single word of that ceremony. I was somewhere else entirely. I was thinking about the trust Catherine and I had set up, about the attorney who handled it, a woman named Patricia, sharp as anyone I've ever met, who had been at Catherine's bedside in those last weeks and who Elise called Aunt Pat even though they weren't related. I was thinking about what I needed to do and in what order. The reception was at the estate. I drank 1 glass of water and pretended to eat dinner. I danced with Elise to a song she had picked because her mother used to hum it when she was cooking. I held my daughter and I said into her hair, very quietly, "I love you more than anything." She squeezed my hand and said, "I know, Daddy." That was the moment I almost broke. Right there on that dance floor. But I didn't. because she needed me to hold it together. She just didn't know it yet. The following morning, I called Patricia at 7 a.m. She answered on the second ring, which told me she either woke up early or never fully slept. I've always suspected the latter. I said, "Pat, I need to see you today, this morning if possible. I need to talk to you about the trust." She heard something in my voice. She said, "I'll be in the office by 8:30. Come straight up." I also called my nephew Darius, who is 34 and works in IT security and is the person in this family you want on your side when something technical needs to happen fast. I told him what I had. I asked him to meet me at Pat's office. I told him to bring his laptop. Then I called Elise. This was the hardest call I've ever made. She answered, sounding happy. Tired, the way newlyweds sound the morning after, but happy. She said, "Good morning, Daddy." "What's up?" I said. "Sweetheart, I need you to come to Patricia's office this morning. Just you. I'll explain everything when you get there. But I need you to trust me, and I need you to come alone." Long pause. "Daddy, what's wrong? I'll explain everything." "Can you come?" Another pause. Then give me 45 minutes. She walked into Pat's conference room an hour later, still in the previous night's makeup, wearing a sweatshirt and jeans. Connor thought she had gone to pick up brunch. She had told him she'd be back in an hour. I played her the recording. I watched my daughter's face change. It happened in stages, the way clouds move across the sky before a storm. Confusion first, then recognition, then something that went very still and very quiet and very hard. She did not cry during the recording. She sat with her hands folded on the table, and she listened to every word her husband had said about her. When it ended, the room was silent for a moment. Then she said quietly, "How long have you had this?" "Since yesterday morning," I said. "Before the ceremony?" She looked at me. "You walked me down that aisle knowing." "Yes. Why didn't you tell me before?" I took a breath. "Because I needed you to hear it yourself, not take my word for it. And because I needed Pat to have time to do what she needed to do." Patricia, who had been sitting at the head of the table with a legal pad in front of her, leaned forward. She had spent the past hour on the phone and at her computer. She explained what she had found. Connor, whose legal name was Connor Michael Ashworth, had a civil judgment against him in Cobb County from 4 years prior. A former business partner who had sued him for $78,000 for fraud related to a property deal. He had settled quietly. There was also an ex-girlfriend in Savannah who had filed a police report which hadn't gone anywhere, but it existed. Connor had moved to Atlanta 14 months before he met Elise at that fundraiser. His commercial real estate career was largely a fiction. He was a licensed agent, but he closed almost no actual deals in 2 years. He had been living, Pat believed, primarily off a line of credit and what appeared to be a loan from his mother that he hadn't repaid. Elise listened to all of this without a word. Then Darius pulled up what he had found. Darius has a way of locating things online that I don't entirely understand, and have chosen not to ask too many questions about. What he showed us was a profile on a property investment forum, where Connor, under a slightly different version of his name, had posted in a thread 2.5 years ago, asking for advice on how to legally access a spouse's inherited assets in Georgia. Elise looked at that screen for a long time. Then she said, "I want to go home." Not to wherever she and Connor were staying. Home, my house, the house with the marigolds in the backyard. "Okay," I said. "Patricia said she would handle the next steps, and she did. She is extraordinarily good at her job. I won't go into every detail of what followed legally. That's Elise's story to tell in her own time. But I will tell you this. Connor was confronted with the recording and with everything Patricia had compiled within 48 hours. He was given a choice. He did not contest anything. The marriage was annulled on grounds of fraud, which Georgia law does provide for when consent to marry was obtained through material deception. Patricia made sure of it. He was gone within a week. I don't know where. What I want to tell you about is the afternoon Elise And I sat in the backyard. It was 2 weeks after everything. The marigolds were coming in strong that year, orange and yellow, just like Catherine always grew them. Elise was sitting on the back steps with her coffee, and I was in the lawn chair I've had since 1987 that I refused to replace, and we didn't say much for a while. Then she said, "Daddy, why didn't you just stop the wedding right then, when you heard him?" I had thought about how to answer that question for 2 weeks. I said, "Because you deserve to hear it yourself. Not from me telling you what he said while you were standing there in your mother's veil with 400 people watching. Because in that moment with all of that, you might have doubted me, even a little. And I couldn't risk you doubting. I needed the proof to be undeniable. I needed you to hear his voice." She was quiet for a moment. "I might have believed you," she said. "You might have," I said. "But might wasn't good enough for what was at stake." She nodded slowly. She set her coffee cup down on the step beside her. "I'm sorry you had to sit through that ceremony knowing," she said. "Don't apologize for that," I said. "Don't ever apologize for that." We sat there a while longer. A cardinal landed on Catherine's bird feeder. Elise noticed it before I did and pointed, the way she used to when she was little, and thought every red bird was a message from somewhere important. Maybe it is. I don't know. I've stopped pretending I know as much as I thought I did. What I do know is this. That trust, the one Catherine and I built for 30 years, the one we hoped would give Elise a soft landing if she ever needed one, it's still intact. Every cent. Patricia made sure of that before the ink was even dry on the annulment. Elise is okay. She has hard days. She told me last month that she still goes over the 2 years in her head, looking for the moments she should have caught. I tell her every time he was practiced. He had done this before, or tried to. This was not your failure. This was his calculation, and it did not work. And it did not work because you are not alone. She's been back at work for 6 weeks. She called me Tuesday to tell me one of her patients, a 6-year-old boy with cerebral palsy, had buttoned his own shirt for the first time. She was laughing and crying at the same time. That's my daughter. That's who she is. Connor did not get the finish line he thought he was an hour away from. And I kept the promise I made to Catherine when we were sitting in that hospital room and she was running out of time. I held her hand and I said, "I will look after her. No matter what it takes, I will look after her." I meant it then. I mean it now. If you are a father out there, or a mother, or anyone who loves someone enough to sit through the worst hour of your life in silence because the timing isn't right yet, I want you to hear this. Patience is not weakness. Waiting for the right moment is not cowardice. Sometimes the most powerful thing you could do for someone you love is hold it together long enough to make sure they are truly protected, not almost protected. Truly. That's all I've got for you tonight. Thank you for being here with me. I've been thinking a lot lately about what Connor actually counted on. Not just the money, though that was the goal. What he really counted on was the assumption that love makes people blind, that a daughter in a wedding dress and a father with tears in his eyes are too overwhelmed to think clearly. He built 2 years of his life on that assumption, and he was wrong. That's the part that stays with me. There's a thing I'd noticed over 63 years of living, and I don't say this to sound wise, I say it because I've seen it happen too many times to ignore it. People who operate through deception tend to believe on some level that everyone else is operating the same way. Connor assumed I would react emotionally because he only knew how to calculate. He couldn't imagine someone staying calm in that hallway, pressing record, walking back into that chapel, and waiting. Not because I wasn't in pain, but because I understood that the moment mattered more than my feelings about the moment. That's not a special skill. That's just something you build slowly over a life. You learn it by making the wrong call when you were young and hot-headed, and it cost you something. You learn it by watching patient people outmaneuver loud ones, again and again, in quiet ways that don't make headlines but change everything. Elise asked me once, a few weeks after it was all over, whether I felt sorry for Connor. I had to think about that. Not long, but I thought about it. The honest answer is, not in the way she meant. I don't carry bitterness toward him, but I don't feel sorry for him either. He made a series of choices over 2 full years, deliberate, calculated, sustained choices to deceive a woman who trusted him and a family that welcomed him. That's not a mistake, that's character. And character, over time, produces outcomes. He's produced the outcome it deserved. What I do feel, what I felt every day since, is something I can only describe as clarity. When you go through something like this, and you come out the other side with the people you love still standing, still intact, something settles in you. You stop worrying about the wrong things. You start paying attention to what's actually in front of you. Elise is rebuilding. She's doing it the way she does everything, quietly, steadily, without a lot of announcement. She's at work. She's tending her mother's marigolds. She called me last week just to talk. Not about any of it. Just to talk. That's how I know she's going to be fine. And I want to say something to anyone listening who is raising someone, protecting someone, loving someone through a world that doesn't always make it easy. The most important work you will ever do will probably never look dramatic from the outside. It will look like patience. It will look like restraint. It will look like sitting in a church pew and smiling when every part of you wants to do something else. But underneath that stillness, if you've done the work, if you've thought it through, you are doing something. And when the moment comes, you will be ready for it. Connor walked into that situation believing he held all the cards. He didn't know I'd been holding mine for 31 years.